say shitim. The word shitim comes from the word shita. The word shita means a position. It means to lean to one side or the other. So shtus, leaning away from rational behavior, is called shtus. And the last thing we learned, I think we got a little further, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 lines down, right? That the leaning away from the middle ground is called shtus. There's negative shtus, which certainly seems to indicate that there's positive shtus, right? Which we'll talk about. Shtus to kedusha, we'll see in the 5th chapter. The pasuk by the Isha Soita, the suspected adulteress. Of course, the word is spelt actually with a samech, and yet in the Torah it's spelt with a shin, sin. Why? In order to connect the idea of the Soita to the idea of a Shoita, someone who is doing something that is unreasonable. Uperish Rashi, what does Rashi say? Tarmi darki et sneers. Uksiva yeshiv yisrael b'shitim, bal pa'or, pinchos. Very negative events in that place. Shu inyan shtus to le'umazeh. This is negative shtus, negative folly. U'kamayma Razal, like Chazal say, ein adam eved aveda, a person won't transgress elim kein nichnas beruach shtus, unless he's overcome by a spirit of folly. Now, how does that work? So that's what the Rebbe is going to explain. It's always interesting how the Rebbeim explain to us how we do averas when they don't do them. But okay, they still understand what happens. V'ruach zeh. Everybody has to explain. What's pshat? Ein adam eved aveda nichnas beruach shtus. What does that mean? Why is that the case? Generally, if you ask someone why they do averas, I have leverage mamas. Okay, so what? It's a hara. So what? Okay, exactly. How does that work? Voruach zeh mechasa le'emes. It covers the truth. Voruach shtus ruach haklipa v'zetrachra. Okay, ruach, a negative. It's not a spirit like some Casper the Friendly Ghost. It's a state of mind. V'nikra shtus al derech melech zoken uksil. It's a shaita, like the old feeble king who makes bad decisions, but he's a king. I mean, he has the ability to make decisions and the ability to have those decisions acted upon, but he's old and feeble, so his decisions aren't necessarily proper decisions. They say, I think it was the Tzanza. The Tzanza once wondered why it is that Chazal called the Yetzer Hara a Melech Zokin Uksil. Zokin means old, Ksil means like an idiot, a fool. He said, I don't understand why they call the Yetzer Hara a fool. He seems pretty smart to me. Why? He fools a lot of people a lot of the time. So then he said that once he was taken by the local parrots and thrown into a dungeon. And down in the dungeon, he noticed that his Yetzer Hara was down there with him. So he said to his Yetzer Hara, what are you doing here? You didn't have to come down here. You could have stayed up there. Why did you have to get? You're really an idiot. And then he realized my Yetzer Hara's a fool. Why did he come down here with me? He could have stayed up there and waited for me to get out. No, he came down. Ksil. Right. Now, the only part of the story I don't understand is I don't really think Chaim Tzanz had a Yetzer Hara, but okay, but say that, whatever. That was his understanding of it. Meaning it's a certain mindset, a certain energy that can overcome a person, and it hides light, it hides revelation, it hides truth. The elokus, godliness, hu emes v'chayim, is truth, life. K'may shekosiv, and in case you didn't believe the Rebbe when he said that, he quotes a pasuk. V'havai elokim emes, hu elokim chayim. The Eibishter Hazu referred to in Tanakh, truth, life, goodness. V'ruach shtus. What's the ruach shtus? What's this energy that might overcome a person? This state of consciousness. Mechasa le'emes v'chayas elokis. It covers up the truth and godly vitality. V'lochen nikra b'shem klipa, and that's why it's called klipa. What's a klipa? A klipa hides something. Kamaya klipa mechasa ala pri. The klipa covers the pri. Now, it's not for our discussion now. The klipa covering the kli is actually obviously, it serves some positive purpose also, right? Protecting the kli. So the fact that there's something called klipa in Eilam Hazah obviously it has a certain positive purpose to the extent that it allows for you and I to serve the Eibishter. Our faith is real faith. Okay, but that's not what the Rebbe is interested in right now. Right? Just the idea of a klipa. What's a klipa? It covers it up. The egg shell. If it weren't for the shell of the egg, you couldn't very well hard boil the egg, could you? Every egg would be poached. Exactly how you would do that is unclear, but you'd pick up the egg if it didn't have a shell, whatever. So the shell has its use, but it covers up what you really want. So too, the ruach shtus mechasa covers, mailim conceals, master hides, different words for concealment. Ala or the gilu elokus, the light of the revelation of godliness. So klipa is that force in the world that doesn't allow us to see elokus, doesn't allow us to see reality properly. Now the Rebbe says something fascinating.
What's ruach shtus?
What?
Ruach shtus?
Ruach shtus.
Ruach shtus, a spirit of folly. V'zeu, and this is hasiba, the reason, mashe efshar adam yochel liyos chas v'shalom, the reason a person can transgress an avera over avera. The lechur, now the Rebbe asks an interesting question. Ech efshar adavar, how is it possible asher yavei adam lidei avera, that a person should come to an avera? Doesn't make sense. Now, it doesn't make sense. Why doesn't it make sense? Understand, we have this thing called the Yetzer Hara, and the Yetzer Hara seems to cause us to do things. Well, okay, we talked about it very, very quickly yesterday, but let's do a survey. Can we do a survey? I'm going to do a little survey. And I assume the answers to the questions will be proper answers. If you don't have the right answer, don't answer. Did God create the world?
Yes.
I assume we all agree with that. We believe that, and we think that God created the world, and that's why we're sitting here, right? If we didn't, have some understanding of that, we would be doing something else. Okay. Did God take us out of Egypt?
Yes.
Were there 10 plagues in Egypt?
Yes.
This isn't mythology. This actually really did happen, which is wild, but it really did happen. Okay. Did God split the Red Sea?
Yes.
Yeah. Did He give us the Torah on Har Sinai?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, gave us the Torah on Har Sinai. Did that Torah include not only the written Torah, but also the oral Torah?
Yes.
God gave the oral Torah to Moshe Rabbeinu. That which you and I call Torah Shabbal Peh, meaning Chazal, the Midrashim, the Gemara, Talmud Bavli. That's all a proper rendition of the Torah Shabbal Peh that Moshe Rabbeinu received from HaKadosh Baruch on Har Sinai.
Yes.
Like it's real, it's true. Okay. Right, and the halacha that comes out of that is the true expression of God's will. Yes. That means when you and I look in the Rishonim and ultimately look in Shulchan Aruch and the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, and we might look up a din in the Mishnah Berurah, whoever it happens to be. So when we look up those things, we are finding a proper expression of what God wants from us. Right? Yes. That's all true. I mean, everything I say is true. There's Yiddishkeit, right? Okay, basic Yiddishkeit. Okay, good. And am I obligated to listen to everything that's in that book? And I'm obligated to do mitzvahs and not do averas. That's all true.
Yes.
Okay, do I do averas?
Yes. Yes.
So that last answer contradicts every single answer that we said to every single question. And that's why the Rebbe asked, why do I do that? I mean, we talked about it quickly yesterday. I can ask you another question. Are cars bigger than humans? Yes. If a human were to have a fight with a car, a moving car, who would win?
Definitely
the moving car would win. Do you, and there are lots of cars on highways, right? And those highways, those cars are moving very, very quickly. So therefore it's dangerous to walk into the highway with your eyes closed, hoping you'll make it to the other side of the highway just before rush. In rush hour, you could probably walk across, but when it's not rush hour, that's a dangerous thing to do.
Yes.
But do you do that?
No.
Why not? I understand. Well, so what? I mean, why not, just take a chance, hey? Well, we don't do things like that. So why do we do it with averas? What happens exactly, right? And it's such an interesting question. I understand we have Yetzer Hara, and I get it, but how does that work? Why does it get me to do things that objectively I understand are not the right things to do, whereas in other realities, it doesn't get me to do that? Right? It doesn't get me to walk into traffic. I understand. As a matter of fact, not only that, we've talked about this in terms of a mashal for the idea of das. What's das? Das is you internalize something so that it's just constantly part of your conscious reality, even if you're not focused on it at that particular moment. What's a mashal for that? Very simple mashal. An adult walking down the street, a busy, busy street. You're walking next to the curb, having a very important conversation with someone who's on the inside of you relative to the street. You are constantly aware of the traffic next to you and are very, very careful not to go too close to the curb because you don't want to fall into the traffic. And it's not like you have to keep saying to yourself, don't fall into the traffic, don't fall into the traffic. That's something you're very aware of constantly, even though you're not thinking about it, you're very involved in the conversation you're having with the person next to you, who's on the other side. So you're facing away from the traffic. Mainly you're looking at the traffic all day. You're not looking at the traffic, but it's there and you know it's there. And you're even aware when a bus comes and you might move 6 inches over a little further because the bus is making some noise. Right? It's not an electric bus. Okay, fine. That's called das. That's called having a very clear connection to something such that it's just part of my conscious reality now. You don't even have to think about it. Okay, so why? We can have that. Do I have that relative to the Eibishter? Well, I might not. Why not? Why are there things that I'll allow myself to do that don't seem to really make sense based on my worldview? And it's interesting because so-called non-religious Jews get very upset that religious Jews do things that aren't right, especially when it's not moral. They get very upset when religious Jews steal in business. They're right, it's called Chil Hashem, they shouldn't do that. But I understand, right? You'll say, well, gotta eat Zahara. I don't know. Religious Jews don't do things that aren't good? Of course they do. In case anybody ever asks you that question, just, well, why are religious Judaism? Because after all, look at so-and-so, he's a religious Jew and he stole. So then you can ask them, and it does, they think about it. It does make them think about things. I say, wait, so your basic assumption is that religious Jews should be better than you. Yeah. So, well, then why aren't you a religious Jew? If you think they're better, why don't you want to be one? We don't usually have much to say about that, to think about it. Because it's not fair to hold people to it. Now, that doesn't mean it's not normal and reasonable, and I get it, but it's not fair to hold people to a higher standard and then say, well, I'm not that, but they should be better. Well, I don't understand. Why are they any different than you? Okay, now, well, but how does it work? Why does it work? And the Rebbeim explained it. Look what the Rebbe says. It says an amazing thing. To l'chora, ech efshar davar sheyavo adam lidei aveira, v'urak lefi she'ena margish. It's because he doesn't feel shebezeh hu nifrad me'elokus. That as a result of this particular action he's doing, he's separating himself from the Eibishter. V'nid meloi, it appears to him, asher oidena biyadusei, that he's still in his Yiddishkeit. It's a really interesting line. In other words, what kind of averas does a person do? The kind of averas that he can convince himself that he can still define himself as a religious Jew and do this avera, because that's his self-definition. He defines himself as a Yid, as from Jew, okay. So he doesn't want to not define himself that way. Therefore, what does he know he can't do? What's completely and totally, and I mean, serious contradiction to the idea of being a religious Jew? What will he never do? Very deserved. Okay, say it. I never said a type for a very deserved.
Drive on Shabbos.
Drive on Shabbos. Right? He's never ever going to get. I mean, if he has to because his wife's going to the hospital, he's in the army. Okay, and it'll be weird. He'll never get in a car on Shabbos. Why? What's absolutely clear to him if he gets into a car on Shabbos and drives the way to the beach?
He's a religious Jew.
He's a Yiddish guy. He just gave the Eibishter a get. That's absolutely clear. What about talking during Kaddish? Well, everybody does. I understand why. That's what frum Jews do, isn't it? I'm in a room full of frum Jews, and half of them are talking during Kaddish, so I guess it's okay. It's written in Shulchan Aruch. You're not allowed to talk during Kaddish or during Chazar Shabbat. Repetition of Shemar Esrei, you're not allowed to talk. You see all sorts of people who seem to know better than you, and they do. Well, don't listen to them. Listen to Shulchan Aruch. You're not allowed to talk during Kaddish. You're not allowed to talk during The repetition of Shemona Esrei. Okay, so don't. Okay. So obviously that's a little less serious than driving on Shabbos. So that's exactly the point. There'll be certain averas, and it really is fascinating. I'm not a sociologist, but I mean, everybody, we all look around. Most from communities have averas that are mutter in that community. Right? Not mamish averas like, they eat bacon. Right? But there'll be certain things that for whatever reason that community is less makpid on that thing. And that, why is it communal? Well, because if that's what's around, it's easier for me to say to myself that it must not be such a big thing, because so everybody does it. What's the big deal? It might be optional. Now, I know it's not optional, right? But it's easier for me to convince myself when I have a taiva that it's not such a big deal. And it depends on the community. Different communities will be different things, right? There are communities where you'll walk into the shul, no one will ever talk during Kaddish. It just doesn't happen. Unfortunately, in Lubavitch, seems to be part of the Bechira Chofshis reality, free choice. It's not free choice to talk during Kaddish. You're not allowed to talk during Kaddish. That's all. It says in Shulchan Aruch, you're not allowed to talk during Kaddish. Chazar Sashatz, from the time he starts Boruch until Kaddish after, you're not allowed to talk. Okay. Now, if an emergency happens, someone falls on the floor and he needs resuscitation, so call a doctor, right? But that's simple. Telling a joke, you're not allowed to tell a joke. You're not allowed to, you want to say hello to someone, wave. They ask you a question, and they'll get the mail. Oh wow, Baruch Hashem, he actually listens to what's written in Shulchan Aruch, at least about this. Okay. So there's going to be certain averas that I'll allow myself to do because I still think that I'm not really separating from the Eibishter by virtue of doing this, because for whatever reason, I don't know, whatever reason, that line, Asher Oidenu B'Yahadusa, he's still in his Yiddishkeit. That's such an amazing line. V'im Yodei Hashem, if he knows the truth, Kameshu as it is, and it was a little heavy here, but okay. Shal Yedei Chet V'Av Nasa Nifrad Melakus, that by virtue of an Averu he becomes separate from the Eibishter. Hallelujah, he says, Davra Averu Rachman Etzlan, he wouldn't do this Averu, Rachman Etzlan, heaven forfend, B'Shum Oifen, that's the Shin Vav Aleph, B'Shum Oifen, in any way. He wouldn't do it. If he truly understood what the stakes are, so he wouldn't do it. And when do we truly understand the stakes? Okay, so as Shmuel said, I'm not going to get into a car on Shabbos, right? It's absolutely clear what that means. I'm not going to turn on a light either, right? We just don't do that. Why not? Because that's just not what you do. You can't. It's not shaykh. It doesn't happen. Okay. And to such an extent that if someone bumps against the light and it goes on or off, oh my God, like he's completely freaked out. Nothing happened. You bumped against it. Nothing happened. Right? No, but it's, oh my goodness. It's going to sit and do tshuva. Why the Eibishter caused me to bump against the light? You've got more serious things to do tshuva about. Don't worry about that one. There's more serious stuff out there. Right? For some people there aren't. Okay, so worry about why the Eibishter bumped you into a light. Right? But getting into a car on Shabbos, the strangest feeling in the world is getting into a car on Shabbos. If you happen to get into one because your wife is going to the hospital and you're going with her, or if you're going to the hospital with an ambulance or something, God forbid, or the army. I remember the army, that was like a completely bizarre experience, right? Because when you do it, if you have to do it, you have to do it. It's mutter. Matter of fact, it's also not to do it. Okay, say there, it's still weird. Just weird. Okay. Rabbi Kaplan has a great story that he was in during the Gulf War. So the Gulf War, there were no soldiers called up to the front lines because there wasn't a front line. It was all, what's called the home guard. It was, the bombs were falling all over the city. So the what's called Pikuda Aref, the people who take care of the home front. So they were all called up. So they're all the middle-aged guys, like once you finish with the front line. So for the last few years before they send you out to pasture, you might be in the home front doing less serious things. I did that for a while also. We all did it, at the end. They said, okay, So Rabbi Chitrik has a great story that he and Rabbi Zeitlin, Oliver Shalom, and Rabbi Raskin, three Lubavitchers from Sfas, who all run Moisda. Rabbi Zeitlin passed away, unfortunately. They run Moisdas. So they were in Miluim together, and it was Shabbos. They're in some base somewhere in the Galil. And the deal was that if there's a siren because there's a bomb, so then you have to get in the Jeep and you have to go somewhere and find. Okay, but they told them no one's allowed to go to sleep. You have to stay awake so that you can respond right away. So that's Friday night, and there were three different levels of going to sleep for three of them. One fell asleep in his uniform. The other took off his boots and fell asleep, and the other got into pajamas and went to sleep. So they said, Mela. So then the siren, of course, goes. So the one who has his boots on, he's the first in the car. He's right. The other guy's like struggling to try to get his boots on. Those boots take a while. I mean, so he's getting on his boots, and the third guy's got to get dressed. So he's throwing his uniform on over his pajamas. So he jumps into the Jeep. He's also about 6'4". So he's in the back of the Jeep, and he's jumping into the Jeep and putting on his uniform while they're starting to move. And because he's putting on his uniform, his foot bangs into the radio at the front. And they start blaring Arabic music out of their Jeep. These three Lubavitchers driving along with Arabic, and they can't turn it off at Shabbos. So enter to turn it off, right? You can't turn it off at Shabbos. You can once you turn off the car, I guess the music stopped. I don't know, but you can't turn it off. Right? Not allowed to turn it on either, but his foot hit it. So I just always laughed at the scene of these three Lubavitchers driving along. It's open Jeep, right? And they're open Jeep with Arabic music blaring out of their Jeep on a Friday night. So what are you gonna do? But that's very strange for a Jew. It's okay. Talking during Kaddish. Now, obviously, there's this many Averas in between those. If the only thing a Jew ever did was he talked during Kaddish, he's been pretty good. That being said, it's still awesome. Sure, but now the Rebbe says something that we have to understand. And all of the Rebbeim say it. Because it's true. But we have to understand what it means. Shabbateva Kol Yisrael, the nature of every Jew is She'ena Reitzah, he doesn't want B'shum Eifin, there's that word again, in any way. Ve'ena Yochel, he's not able klal at all, Liyos Nifrad Me'elokus. A Jew is not able to separate himself from the Eibishter. Doesn't want to and isn't able to. Now, that's a very hard thing to understand because, first of all, we understand in our own lives that we might, if you're telling me that every single thing that I do that's not exactly in line with Shulchan Aruch separates me from the Eibishter, so then that might happen to every single one of us. And, I mean, we look around the world, there certainly seem to be a lot of Jews who don't seem to be so interested in being connected to the Eibishter, and yet the Rebbeim are saying that the nature of a Jew is they want to be connected to the Eibishter and they can't separate themselves from the Eibishter. So, what do the Rebbeim mean when they say that? So how do we define an object? We define an object by how it works and how it is in a state of health. If you define the heart, so you define the heart in terms of a healthy heart beating, there's, two ventricles, and this sends blood to the lungs, and this sends blood to the rest of the body, and you explain how the heart works. Right? That's how when you're learning anatomy in the beginning of medical school, so you learn how all of the different parts of the body work. Right. Now, is there a possibility that part of the body isn't working the way it should work and it's not a healthy heart? Yeah, that's definitely true. So who understands that? Well, every doctor on some level and the cardiologist on a very sophisticated level, because that's what he's going to be dealing with. Okay, and when I also know there's such a thing, I don't know exactly how you identify it or what the problem would be because we don't know enough about hearts. But fine, there's such a thing called a diseased heart. That's very, very clear. But I don't define a heart by the heart in a state of disease. I define a heart in the state of what the heart as a healthy heart is. And a healthy Jew is someone who can't separate themselves from the Eibishter. They don't want to be separate. And that's why it's going to take a spirit of folly, temporary insanity, for that Jew to do something that does separate them. And we'll see, the Rebbe is explaining what that insanity is. Right? Because objectively, I don't want to be separate. Right? Now, what if I'm in a state where I haven't been taught anything about it and therefore I have no clue? Well, it's enough, so that Jew consciously might not have any desire to have a connection to the Eibishter. But interestingly enough, when certain events happen to that Jew, it might arouse in them a very powerful desire to stay connected to the Eibishter. And in every Jew, it'll be expressed in a different way. And we see that all the time. And living in this country, you see it all the time. Yidden are about. Varaya, what's the proof? The Rebbe brings an interesting proof, and it's Jewish history. The kasher bali de nisayon, when a Jew comes to a trial, the kaifin say chas v'shalom, and they're forcing him chas v'shalom, alinian shel kfira, something to blaspheme or deny the Eibishter, deny their Yiddishkeit. The az yefshar litas, at that moment it's impossible to err, E-R-R, v'lachshev, and to think, she'ena nasa nifred melokos. If the Soviet has his gun to the head of the Yid chas v'shalom and tells him to bow down to some Soviet idol by doing an avera or whatever it happens to be, so obviously it's very clear what's at stake at that moment. And Jewish history is full of people not doing that. Harihu mashli chayav mineged. He'll give up his life. Umakabel alav kol minei yisudim, and he'll accept upon himself all sorts of afflictions, chas v'shalom. U'meisin afshav v'dush shmei yisbarach, and he'll give up his life. Right? That's Jewish history. That's also Jewish present. Right? There are all sorts of people in this country who right now are putting their life, less right this minute, right? People in Yehuda v'Shomron are in more danger than anybody else right now. But it's certainly been the case for the last year and a half that there's been thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of Jews who are putting their life on the line for something, for what they understand to be Yiddishkeit. Their understanding of what it means to be a Jew and what it means to be who they are, they're willing to give up their life for it. Do they understand that in a complete and total way like someone might understand? No, okay, but do they have an understanding that, and one thing which became abundantly clear to the Israeli public, that these people hate you not because you're an Israeli, they hate you because you're a Jew. And almost everybody in this country gets it. There's 10% of the country that's so dense they'll never get it. They unfortunately run the place, but that's they're not the elected officials, but they're the people who run the place, and that's a little frightening. But okay, that just seems to be the way it is in a lot of places. Okay, but then 85, 90% of the people in this country get it. Okay. And so they're willing to be meisha nefesh for it, and they're willing to send their children, which is even harder. And they do, they do. And there's definitely Mesiras Nefesh in all of that. There's no question. Is that everybody's avodah? That might not be everybody's avodah. It might be some people have another avodah. Okay, say that, but that not to belittle that. It's real Mesiras Nefesh, no question. The soldiers. The army per se, I don't know. Right? The soldiers in the army, they're incredible. They're amazing. Right? And almost every song, Israeli culture, almost every song that has been written and sung about this war has been talking about God and bitachon. The so-called non-religious, so-called secular songs have all been filmed. All of them. You don't know, you have to live here to understand these sort of things, to hear them. It's like I hear them, but they're just out there. People hear them, people singing them in the street, right? The level of bitachon and emunah that is floating around is really quite astounding. It's just astounding. Okay, so now what's another example of this? So you see it in this country. Right? It's because in this country there's one thing that happens in this country that doesn't happen as obviously anywhere else, and you get a certain appreciation of. That it's hard for Jews in Chutz La'aretz to get the appreciation of, even though they do, but it's a whole, there's this thing called Am Yisrael. And you get that here, and you just don't get it in Baltimore. It's just different. Not that you don't know there is such a thing. You do, right? Of course you do. But it's just, it's the Jewish community, and there's this thing called Am Yisrael, which is holy, and you just see it here. Because it's everywhere. And they might be doing things you go, what in the world is that guy doing? He's also part of it. Don't worry. Don't push him out. Don't cancel him. He's just as Jewish as you are. He's just part of this thing called Am Yisrael as you are. He's just as much part of it. Would you rather he doesn't do what he's doing now? Yeah, I'm sure there's probably things that you do he'd rather you didn't do either. Okay, say that. But there's this amazing thing, and they're pretty holy. There's a holiness to them that's really quite astounding. There's a craziness to them also. So imagine the following situation to explain what the Rebbe just said. Berel and Shmerel, two guys in shul. They can't stand each other. Berel hates Shmerel and Shmerel hates Berel. And they spend much of their time saying Lashon Hara about each other. Right? In shul, they sit at other ends of the shul, but both in the back, and they spend their time, as much time davening, more time worrying about what the other one is doing than davening. And if Shmerel is laughing, it annoys Beryl to no end. That how could it be that such a lowlife and a thief like Shmerel is enjoying himself? It really bothers him. Can't stand each other. And Beryl is talking about how Shmerel is a creep, and Shmerel is talking about how Beryl is a creep, and that's their life, that's their chayas. They get such chayas from this enmity that they have between each other. Just can't stand each other. Okay, one day Beryl walks out of shul, and some 20-year-old Soviet heathen comes up to him and says, I'm looking for someone named Shmerel. Where is he? This is Beryl's chance. He can get rid of Shmerel once and for all. Does Beryl tell this Soviet where Shmerel is?
No.
Not a chance. Right? The Soviet knows he knows where he is. So he takes his gun and he hits Beryl on the side of the head, and Beryl falls in the snow and he's bleeding from his ear. Does he tell them where Beryl is? Not a chance. He kicks him, beats him up. Does he tell him? Not a chance. In shul, what wasn't clear? But this is an expression of my Yiddishkeit, because how can I be Yiddish if I like someone as such a lowlife like Shmerel? That's an affront to my Yiddishkeit, my Chassidishkeit. Shmerel is such a lowlife that if I were to like him, it means I'm not a Chassidish Yid. That's what Beryl might have convinced himself, which is of course shtus, okay, beseder, but he might have convinced himself in the heat of the moment. That moment happens every single morning in Chakras, beseder, okay. Out there in the snow, what was completely clear. A Jew giving another Jew over to a heathen like this is absolutely is contrary to everything that Yiddishkeit is all about, and there's no way in the world Beryl would ever do that. Mm-hmm. He's willing to be Meser Nefesh to keep Shmerel out of the hands of this heathen. So interesting, and you can imagine it happening. You can imagine the conversations in shul. That, unfortunately, we can imagine. And you can also imagine Beryl being Meser Nefesh to save Shmerel. Because out there, it's absolutely clear, like the Rebbe said, it's absolutely clear what's at stake. And Beryl won't separate himself from the Jewish people for one moment. All right? But what about when he's in shul and he's talking about how terrible Shmerel is? So it's not clear to him that this is his Yiddishkeit, this is his chayas. How can anybody like a guy like Shmerel? As the Rebbe just explained. Now that's obviously a rather extreme example of it, but I mean that's something we can imagine. Because when it's clear, it's clear. V'chein, the Rebbe says, fifth line, end of the line. V'chein nirda b'muchash. We see this clearly, actually. B'muchash means with our chushim, with our senses, meaning we see this in a concrete way. Gam afilu b'dargas apchuses, even in the lower levels, b'kal shel b'kalim, in the simplest of Jews, Pesha Yisrael, even Jews who are not particularly religious, they do not live for Yiddishkeit so seriously. What will they do? They'll die for it. Da'alulim limsor nafsham, they're willing to give up their lives al kedusha Shema Yisbarach, for the kedusha Shema Yisbarach, for the sake of sanctifying God's name. because really they just want to be connected. They might be overcome by the spirit of folly more than they should. And why is that? Because at that moment they're not exactly sure that this is separating them from the Eibishter for whatever reason. Now that's wrong, okay, Beseder, but they're convinced. They're not making a clear, objective, rational decision. So that's called shtus. That's why it says every evader is nichnas beruach shtus. The person is temporarily insane and has lost sight of what's really true. Temporarily. But at those tough moments, Lafida Azhar Yodeya, Margish Benafshe, he knows and he feels in his soul. This Jew who's being challenged. Ve'ena Reitzach Chas v'Shalom, he doesn't want Chas v'Shalom Lipared Melokei Yisrael to be separate from the God of Israel. The Kezel Liyah is Chas v'Shalom b'Chas v'Shalom, that this to be Chas v'Shalom b'Chas v'Shalom nifrad, separate, Melokei Yisrael, ein b'Yichelishim b'Yisrael, a Jew can't do that. So any Jew has any sensitivity to being Jewish will have red lines that they don't cross. Because if you cross that red line, you're not a Yid. And they're a Yid. They see themselves as a Yid. In a certain generation in North America, what was that red line? Not giving tzedakah. If you didn't give tzedakah, you weren't Jewish. That's how they related to it. There was a generation that was the Yiddishkeit. The Yiddishkeit was you give tzedakah. Right? There were certain foods they probably also didn't eat. Right? I mean, they'd trade food in the house, but they wouldn't eat bacon or whatever. There'd be certain foods. But tzedakah. They just believed in giving tzedakah, and if you didn't give tzedakah, you were somehow you were ois Yiddishkeit. Like what? This guy, right?
Ois Yiddishkeit?
Out.
Oh.
Ois out. Outside of Judaism. Tzedakah is still something that Baruch Hashem is considered very important. I don't think they gave that. They weren't able to transfer that to their children to the extent that they had it, but that was definitely a very important part of Yiddishkeit, the whole generation. Right? Tzedakah. Remember my father having a conversation with a non-Jewish guy that he knew. The non-Jewish guy said, so-and-so's Jewish. So now my father knew, who gave money and who didn't give money. It was a small community. He says, he's not Jewish. I mean, he wasn't on the lists. So it can't be. And he had his last name was Black, which is it could be, could not be. It's not necessarily a Jewish name. There's a lot of Jews with that name. There's a lot of non-Jews with that name. So he said, no, it's not Jewish. Sure, he's not Jewish. He said, I know he's Jewish. He sits beside me in church every Sunday. I know him well. That was the line the guy said to my father. He sits beside me in church every Sunday. I know him well. He's Jewish.
That's a creepy line.
This was 60 years ago.
No.
That's a crazy line. Now, what's interesting about the line, first of all, the guy's Jewish. Second of all, if he doesn't know, so the non-Jew is going to make sure that he knows. The guy sitting beside him in church is going to, don't you ever forget that you're Jewish. Right? I mean, you might have got you did tshuva because you're sitting next to me in church. No, you didn't. You did tshuva. But tzedakah was like that was.
Maybe he's putting it in the collection plan.
What?
Maybe he's putting it in the collection.
He could be putting in the. I'm sure he's putting in the collection. I had a no. There was 100%. There were two brothers in Vancouver, both very wealthy, in different businesses. One gave a tremendous amount of money to Jewish causes. The other gave, when you say a tremendous amount of money, you're talking 60 years ago, he would give a few $100,000 a year. Now that was a lot of money, right? A house was $25,000. That was a lot of money, right? His brother used to give about $25,000 to, Salvation Army and, things like that. His brother was man of the year all the time in Vancouver. What does a brother figure out? I can give 1/10 of what my brother gives, but I'll give it to non-Jewish causes, and I'll be the biggest giver in the cause. I'll be the biggest guy, because the Jews, if you don't give $250,000, if you have it and you're not giving a serious chunk, so then, My father told the story. It's just an amazing story about what Jews are all about in Stuka. And it's this mimer that a Jew doesn't want to be separate. So what does he think you have to do to be connected? Well, if it's Stuka, so then it's Stuka, and it'll be Mamash, there'll be Moshe Nefesh for it. The Yom Kippur War broke out. So my father was the head of the doctors' part, I don't know, whatever they called it, of the Federation. So he was called to a meeting in between Musaf and Mincha. They had a meeting in Joe Siegel's basement of the big guy. Now, my father wasn't one of the big hitters in town, but he was, so he was told to come to the meeting. So he went to the meeting once, what happens at these meetings. So Joe Siegel was there, and there were, the 5-6 richest guys in town. And Joe Siegel was a tough guy. He was one of those cigar chomping guys. He used to call my father, "Hey, Cappy." No one called my father. So it was Dr. Kaplan. No, Cappy, hey, Cappy, how you doing, Cappy? He owned Zellers for a while. He was a pretty serious guy in business. So Joe says, okay, I'm giving, now again, this is 1973. I'm giving $250,000. This is also a special thing. These guys already gave their pledge to, this is a special thing for the war. So he gave $250,000. So they go around the room and they're all giving $250,000. And some guy says 75. So my father's sitting there. He says, okay, 75, that's a lot of money, 75,000. So Joe looks at him and said, I'm not going to repeat what Joe Siegel said because Joe Siegel had a serious mouth. So he said, I'm having a tough time. And he probably was. His business wasn't going. He's having a rough time. So Joe told him to sell your expletive deleted boat. He sold his boat and gave it to Stoker. He said, sell your boat. Don't tell me you're having a hard time. You have a boat, don't you? Sell it. He sold his boat. That's Mesiras Nefesh for that guy. To sell his boat, he loves his boat. Imagine the pleasure he gets from his boat. He goes on, and then Vancouver's on the Pacific Ocean. There's so many beautiful places to go, and you just sail up into the islands. And in the winter, you can do it too. The weather's fine. It's like this, right? Sold his boat. Wow, unbelievable. Okay. Because he thought that he was separating himself from the Amish by not selling his boat. So he sold his boat. He's not going to separate himself. Now, obviously, we have to understand that everything written in Shulchan Aruch is all the same as selling the boat. But that's a wild place to be. That's a serious place to be. לפי דעזר יודעי ומרגיש ואין הרצה חסרם להיפרד מאלוקי ישראל דכזה ליאס חס ושלום וחס ושלום. There's 8 lines now. נפרד מאלוקי ישראל אין ביחד לשום בר ישראל. אבל, the Rebbe says, בשערי of דברים, in other things that aren't so obvious. היינו בשערי אבדus רחמנא ליצלן, avedus that aren't so catastrophic as getting into a car on Shabbos, as giving shmerel over to the Russians. Hareina Yadeya, he doesn't know. Hareina Margish, and he doesn't feel. And the Rebbe's going to explain why not. That's really in a few lines. He doesn't feel. Shenasa Yadeza Nifrad Miachdusi Yisbarach. He doesn't feel that through this he's separating himself from the unity of God. V'nid Malay, and it appears to him, Ki Yodi B'Yadusei, K'Sher he's still in his Yiddishkeit like he was. He doesn't realize what this event has caused. Now, that doesn't mean that he can't fix it immediately. How do you fix it? Do a mitzvah, and then you're immediately reconnected. Beseder. But at that moment, he's not there. First parak in Tanya. How's the Baal HaTanya describe a Russian? Someone who's doing an aved. Someone who's doing something against the will of the Eibishter. At that moment, he's a Russian. What does that mean? He's a terrible, evil, horrible person with big warts and yellow teeth? No. Just that moment, he's not connected to the Eibishter. That's what the Alter Rebbe tells us right in the beginning of Tanya, which is so challenging. Okay, now what if he does tshuva? He decides, you know what? No, I don't want to stay here, and he comes back, and he does. So how does he do that? He does a mitzvah. Go do a mitzvah, and you'll be connected to the Eibishter in an unbelievably powerful and beautiful way. Okay. The Zeba, where does this come from? Zeba mi Ruach Shtus. This is the Ruach Shtus that we're talking about on the previous page. It's not true. It's not true what he's saying to himself that he's still connected. At this moment, he's not connected. That doesn't mean he can't reconnect the next moment, but at this moment, he's not connected. It covers up the light and the revelation that he shouldn't feel it. And therefore, I'm not so upset being separate from it because I'm not feeling it. I'm not feeling that I'm separate from it. Pedish. The Ruach Shtus Gorim Loila Adam, Ruach Shtus causes in a person heder hergish, a lack of sensitivity. To what? Delikus. Just like a person can be insensitive to other people, so he can be insensitive to the godliness all around him. And therefore he might do things that show a lack of sensitivity to godliness, not understanding that this action is going to separate me from the Eibusher, just like he could say something to another person that he is not sensitive enough to realize that this could hurt the person. He's not sensitive. Vahainu, shetoike fachemda, the dearness, bataiva, in this desire, v'chamimus, the warmth, the passion, the nefesh b'amis. Nefesh b'amis is very passionate, so nefesh b'amis gets into something. Gorim loy, what does that cause? Hakridus, coldness, v'heder hergish, and a lack of sensitivity, binyanim aruchnim, in spiritual things. I know we all want it, and especially in this generation, right? Because the opportunities in Gashmias are just rather beyond anything that anybody could have ever imagined, right? You just talk to some guy in Poland 20 years ago and describe your life to him. You go, what are you, crazy? Mashiach must have come, right? He said, no, actually we're still in Golos, believe it or not. But it's really? Like if it's cold, you just turn on heat. Yeah, and if you're sweating, you just get in a shower. There's this thing called a shower, and you just wash off the dirt. Yeah, and the mikveh, you can see your feet in the mikveh. Yeah, no problem. And anytime you want to learn a mimer, there's basically you have your choice of about 7,000 of them. Yeah, now that's one of the problems, right? There's so many things to learn that when you have an extra 20 minutes and you say, oh, I'll sit down and learn something, you waste the 20 minutes trying to figure out what you're going to learn, and you don't get any learning done. There's so much stuff out there. In the old days in Russia, when they had one mimer, they had, probably the next mimer we'll learn, Leisa Mishakela. So there was a time in Russia, the early 50s, where there was one mimer of the Rebbe that had made it to Russia, to a certain group in Russia. And they had that one mimer. It was the only mimer of the Rebbe that had, Leisa Mishakela, Parshas Mishpatim Tavshin Beis. They just learned that mimer over and over and over and over. They knew that mimer clear, right? Because that's the only mimer of the Rebbe they had, right? You want to learn something from the Lubavitcher Rebbe? Which language do you want? You speak Portuguese best? Oh, here's a Portuguese book and see. You speak French best? Here's French. Spanish best? Here's Spanish. English? Here's English. Hebrew? Here's English. Yiddish? Here's right? I'm sure there's more. A friend of mine who translated all sorts of stuff into German. Lives in Switzerland, so he translated all sorts of stuff into German at a book publishing company. Well, the only thing they did was translate Torah into German. Okay, switch, Dutch, whatever. Okay. What language do you want? So there's lots for now. That was all about that. Most of what I was talking about was not so terrible, right? Otherwise, Baruch Hashem. But there's also a lot of Gashmias out there. Try to explain to this Jew in Poland what a tropical beach looks like. What do you mean? It's like warm all the time. Yeah, it's warm. And the water's warm too. Yeah, you can go in the water and not get eaten. Yeah, you can go in the water. And then when you come out of the water, well, if the salt bothers you, there's a shower, you can wash off the salt, and then you sit on a chair, and it's just really nice. Yeah, but you probably are hungry and thirsty. No. There's food all over the place. You can, yeah, wow. How many places like this? Oh, hundreds, thousands. Really? Wow. Never heard of such a thing. It must just be unaffordable that only like 10 people in the whole world can afford it. No. And even if you can't afford it, you have this little piece of plastic, you just put it on there and you worry about it later. You don't really have to pay. So you can go. Doesn't matter. You just feel like going to San Tropez for a day, so just go. Why not? Okay. He would just think you're off your rocker, that guy. Right? So what happens? A person can get very passionately connected to certain physical desires, and then what happens? He loses his sensitivity to spirituality. He becomes dulled to the pleasure of elokus. Perish. It's always better in Yiddish. Die Zugebundenkeit. Okay, bond, the boundness, the bond, the connection, right? And Zukochkeit, a koch. Koch is a very hard word to translate into English. I don't know. I mean, the word is like to be focused on something or to be very into something. Relative to the Rebbe, people would always ask if you weren't at the Farbrengen, you'd ask by the Rebbe, what did the Rebbe koch in the Farbrengen? What was the Rebbe like focused on? What was he involved in the Farbrengen? What was the koch? That's a koch. It's a hard word to translate into English. But the person's bound upness and zukochkeit, their involvement in inyane chemda v'taiva b'rasicha, in physical matters, b'rasicha, boiling, meaning they're very passionately involved. Can explain to you with great passion the food in a restaurant. Zemakara hergish, this cools down their sensitivity, their hair, sensitivity, and gefühl, from feelings. Binyanim ruchnim, in spiritual things. Meaning, even though we'd like to, we can't have our cake and eat it too. That does not mean that we deny ourselves physical reality. That's not the Aveda of this generation. We're not Ravitcha Masmid ate buckwheat groats all week long. That's all he'd ever eat, and have a piece of chicken on Shabbos. That's not our Aveda in this generation. Right? But what? What do we have to be careful of? And it's an avodah not to be careful about this. And don't put your head in it. Don't get so involved in it. You eat, so eat. There's food. Baruch Hashem, you're blessed. There's so much food. Put the food on your plate, eat it, and get on with life. Well, that's why living in yeshiva is so nice, right? Just, how long does it take to eat? 15 minutes, you're done. You don't have to, as my wife always says, the good meal is a meal I didn't have to cook and I don't have to wash the dishes. That's a good meal, right? Fantastic. Dude, how long does it take? It doesn't take any time. Dining? Ehrliche Yidden don't dine. They just eat. And then they get on with life. They don't go out dining, right? Might they sit at a table with a lot of food with a bunch of people and spend some time there? Yes, it's called a Farbrengen. That they'll do. But sit and dine?
What is only gefühl?
Gefühl.
Gefühl.
What's a feel?
Oh.
Feelings. Comes from feelings. Their hair is, you hear it, meaning you're sensitive to it. A far hair is a test. A their hair is sensitivity, meaning are you hearing it? Do you get it? Is more Yiddish. Is azoy. Azoy is like completely. Well, azoy feel completely. Azoy is really like this. Feel fully. Iber gegeben. Iber over gegeben given over. In his taivas and his physical desires, vagashmim, material and physical, as der ruchnis dicker hergish, therefore his spiritual sensitivity is by him, completely concealed. Right? So what does David HaMelech say? And we say it every Shabbos morning. Tamuru, taste and see. Ki tova vaya, God's good. Okay, so I can sensitize myself to the beautiful taste of elokus. Or I can sensitize myself to the different tastes between a Cabernet Sauvignon and a Merlot. If I don't sensitize myself to the difference, I won't know. But if I work at it, I can know the difference between a Cabernet Sauvignon and a Merlot. And I'll tell you the difference. I won't, but someone will. Reuven can tell you the difference between, this is Israeli and this is French. They're both good. What did he sensitize himself to? What did he work on? Being sensitive to the difference between this wine and that wine. What can he sensitize himself to? The difference between a mimer, the Rebbe Marash, and a mimer of the Rebbe Rayatz. He can sensitize himself to that. How does the Rebbe Marash discuss Elokus, and how does the Rebbe Rashab, his son, discuss Elokus? What does the Rebbe Yadz do to a mimer of the Rebbe Rashab? Because almost all of the mimarim of the Frierdiker Rebbe are mimarim of his father, but how does he explain those mimarim? What's unique about his explanation? One of the things they say it's so interesting. One of the things they say by the Frierdiker Rebbe, so the Rebbe Rashab writes the word v'chule a lot, etc. And the Rebbe Rayatz once said, take out the v'chules. Meaning, I'm going to explain the v'chules. I'll explain the etc. You can take it out. Right? Okay. Because there's what am I sensitive to? Well, it's all a matter of what I sensitize myself to, right? So I can become very, very sensitive to physical things, right? What's that line? I don't know whether people still say it, but I remember it. Izzy will remember it. I'm in tune with my body. Remember he said that? I'm in tune with my body. So don't be so in tune with your body, and be a little more in tune with your soul, and your life will be better. Right? Oh, I'm getting a sugar rush. I had too much sugar. Oh, give me a break. Just get on with your life and stop being such a moron. A sugar rush. Fat. Right? Is there something to do? So do it. Just stop with your sugar rush. So don't eat an extra apple. Sugar. Your body's producing sugar from everything you eat. So just settle down. Right? Sugar rush. It's a little too in tune. I knew. So what can I become? Shanu Shanasa Bilti Margish Kol. I can become completely insensitive to Yiddishkeit. Now look what the Rebbe says. Now the Rebbe says something really interesting. Because I think, the way we've been discussing it, the way we've been bringing about it, and I think you understand why we've been bringing about it this way. We've been talking about it in the context of refraining from negative behavior, right? That's sort of the feeling you get through everything, right? It's all about not doing the Aveira. Now look what the Rebbe says. It's the first thing he talks about. He doesn't talk about not doing an Aveira. Why is it that I might be seduced by certain physical pleasures? So the Rebbe says, "Ve'ena margish lahanoyim." He doesn't feel the pleasantness, va'rivus, the sweetness, va'toiv, and the goodness, va'ilu, and the loftiness, b'kiyam mitzvahs, in doing the mitzvah. V'chein, similarly, puts the mitzvah asay first. Similarly, ain't a margish abchisus, so therefore he doesn't understand the lowliness, b'richuke melukus, in his distance from the shenasa that's brought about al yidei chayvava. Why might I be insensitive to the fact that I separate myself by virtue of doing certain things that aren't healthy things to do? Because I don't feel the beauty of a mitzvah, so I don't know what I'm missing. If I could feel the beauty of the mitzvah, I wouldn't give it up for anything. Mm-hmm. And that's why Chassidus focuses so much on doing positive things. The Rebbe's whole avodah, and it's not that the Rebbe makes this up, except that it makes it up. It's not a chiddush of the Rebbe. It's there in Chassidus. The Rebbe Shab talks about it. I was looking for it yesterday. I wanted to find exactly where he does, and I didn't find it. I mean, it's in Samach Vav. I just remember exactly which mind. The Rebbe Shab also talks about the fact that you'll sensitize yourself to elukus by involving yourself in positive activity. Do more mitzvahs and you'll develop a greater sensitivity to elukus. And our Rebbe's whole avodah, our Rebbe almost never talks about the nefesh bahamis. He's talking about the nefesh elokis all the time. Just do mitzvahs. Stay busy doing good things and everything will work out. You'll have less of a taiva, you'll also have less time. We have less of a taiva for shtus in Olam Hazeh when you're busy doing good things. You're not learning right now, go on mitzvah. You're waiting in line in a bank where you have 3 parking Rambam. What do Lubavitchers do on buses and on trains and waiting in line in bank and waiting in line in the supermarket?
Chitas Rambam.
Chitas Rambam. I mean, they're so busy, they've got so much to do, they're like so busy all the time. Right? The Rebbe just keeps us busy.
What is V'ha Rivas? To go back a second.
What?
V'ha Rivas, what does it mean?
Sweetness. Array, something sweet. It's so interesting. The Frierdiker Rebbe, the first thing he says is the sweetness of Torah and mitzvahs. If I appreciate the sweetness of Torah and mitzvahs, I'm not going to want anything else. If I don't appreciate the sweetness of Torah and mitzvahs, I'm going to want something sweet in my life. Okay, so what's that? Pudding. Pudding is sweet. But a mitzvah's sweeter. That doesn't mean I don't taste pudding. Of course I taste pudding. You're not Ravitcha Masman, you're not the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe didn't taste food. Okay, you're not there. You're not going to get there. Mashiach, I don't know what'll happen. Right? But you're not going to get there. So no, that's not your avodah, not to taste food. That's ridiculous. Of course, so you're going to taste food. So you're going to take a dressing and put it on your salad. You'll probably don't take a dressing you don't like. Oh, I'm going to suffer. Ugh, fat. Then you're going to walk around thinking how great you are because you didn't take the right salad dressing, and that's worse. Just take the right salad dressing, eat it, and get on with life. Right? Supposed to think you're so holy because I don't take the right salad dressing. I'm so holy. Right? Put whatever one you like, put it on the salad, eat it fast, and get on with life. Right? And if you want, in the same time, you can ask the guy next to you, behind you in line, which salad dressing do you want? Oh, the one I have, good here. You want that much? And give him to do something good for another Jew while you're at it. Okay, big deal. It's good. It is a big deal. Right? Okay. Feel the beauty of Elokus. How do we feel the beauty of Elokus? How do we sensitize ourselves to Elokus? The Rebbe told us in the second paragraph. Learn Chassidus and get your Nefesh Bahamis to appreciate that Elokus is a beautiful thing. Right? Tamuru Kitoi Vavayo. The Rebbe used to quote the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe used to talk with a sing-song. We didn't know what the sing-song was. How are we supposed to know? But the Rebbe once said that line in David HaMelech, Tamuru Kitoi Vavayo. Taste and see as the Eibishter is good. See, the Eibishter tastes good. But how do I taste the Eibishter? Well, I have to develop a taste for the Eibishter the same way I have to develop a taste for anything else, right? What foods do most children like? The ones that their parents fed them, so they developed a taste for that food. Why do Polish people like, Polish food? That's what they ate, so they developed a taste for that. Okay, so if we feed ourselves elokus, we'll develop a taste for elokus. And then we'll find it tasty. And it's beautiful, it's tasty. See a couple more words of the Rebbe here, and then we'll stop. Ubederech klal, what is this generally? Kisir nefesh b'hamis shemachasel nefesh elokis. The fact that nefesh b'hamis will cover up the nefesh elokis. I have to allow the nefesh elokis to express itself, but it's only going to express itself through the nefesh b'hamis. So I have to get the nefesh b'hamis to appreciate that it's really just a kli, just a vessel to help express the nefesh elokis. And can we get the nefesh b'hamis into elokus? Absolutely. I nefesh b'hamis. Every single one of us got up earlier than we would have liked to in order to sit here and learn Chassidus. Who made that decision? My Nefesh Bahamis made that decision. Of course, the ultimate impetus of the decision is coming from the Nefesh Elokis, but my Nefesh Bahamis, conscious me, is the one who decided I got out of bed and came to learn Chassidus. Okay, kol kavod. Good job, Nefesh Bahamis. Give him a pudding as a result, as a reward. Who kisur nefesh b'hamis shemachasel nefesh elokis. Dihina nefesh elokis, who elokus betzim amuhusa, and what we'll see tomorrow morning. The Rebbe is going to discuss the nefesh elokis for a few lines. What's nefesh elokis all about? What does he want? What's his experience? Okay, and then the Rebbe is going to discuss the nefesh b'hamis. Okay, we'll go there tomorrow. Frierdiker Rebbe is so amazing in describing reality in very, very vivid terms.